If you've seen something like K-pop demon hunters, you might think you already have an image in your head. Idols singing and dancing while dealing with demons. Chosen people, living double lives, standing between the normal world and something dangerous. That image isn't accurate, but it didn't appear for no reason. Stories like that borrow ideas from something that has existed in Korea for a very long time. A real belief system people still turn to today. It's called Musok. Musok is what people usually call Korean shamanism. In Musok, God doesn't mean one all-powerful being. It's more like a category. There are many different spirits and higher beings that stay close to people. They can talk to humans, influence them, and sometimes try to speak through a person. When one of those beings tries to attach itself to you, and you're forced into accepting it, that process is called sinnerim. It's not treated like a blessing. People see it more as a turning point. If you can't handle it, your life is believed to start falling apart. When I was young, I was supposed to go through sinnerim, but I didn't. And that's where the problem started. I didn't become a mudang, a spiritual intermediary in Korean shamanism, someone believed to communicate with spirits and perform rituals for the living. But I didn't walk away clean either. In shows like K-pop demon hunters, they deal with demons by performing singing, dancing, fighting. Real Musok isn't about hunting demons. But interestingly enough, it does involve singing and dancing. In Musok, shamans sing, chant, and move their bodies to deal with spirits. They don't fight them. They calm them down, negotiate with them, or send them away. That whole process is called good. It's not a concert. It's not a battle. It's a ritual meant to handle what's already here. I ended up in an in-between state, like a door that was never fully closed. After that, I started running into ghosts more often than other people do. And no, ghosts aren't demons. Not in the way people imagine. Most of the time, they're what a human leaves behind. Feelings that never settled. Attachments that never let go. Grudges that couldn't fade out. That doesn't mean they're safe. Some of them hurt people. Some of them ask for help. Some of them just watch. Some of them don't even know what they're doing anymore. But there's one rule I learned the hard way. Once you see them, you're connected. And this is one of the stories about what I experienced after getting stuck on that line. I was a high school student at the time. I lived in a small rural town, the kind of place where nothing much ever happened. During winter break, I took several part-time jobs to earn some money. One day, a friend told me that a small hospital nearby was looking for a temporary worker. The pay was unusually good. I wanted the job, but I was already working somewhere else, and I couldn't bring myself to quit without finishing my contract. About 2 weeks passed. Then I heard they were still hiring. By coincidence, my previous job ended that same week, so I went straight to the hospital. At the front desk, I told the receptionist I was there about the part-time job. She looked confused and started whispering to the person next to her. I heard them asking each other if the hospital had even posted an ad. After that, she studied my face for a long moment. Then, with a slight frown, she told me to go down to the basement, to the morgue. I followed the signs and found a small office underground. Inside, there was a large middle-aged man asleep on a sofa. He didn't look like a doctor. He was wearing a sleeveless shirt, a white apron, and the room smelled strongly of alcohol. 2 empty soju bottles were lying beside him. I sat across from him and waited. After 10 minutes, he still hadn't moved, so I gently tapped his knee. Nothing. When I stood up and reached for his shoulder, His eyes suddenly snapped open. I pretended not to be startled and greeted him politely. When he asked who I was, I told him I came for the part-time job. He slowly looked me up and down, then asked if I even knew what the job was. I hesitated. Then he said it for me. Assisting with the bodies. In simple terms, cleaning the dead. People like me were never supposed to work in places like that. Places where the living and the dead stayed too close. I remembered my grandmother's warning. Never go near where the dead gather. But I hadn't seen a ghost in almost a year. I thought maybe I had finally escaped that world. And honestly, the pay was too good to refuse. So I said yes. He told me to come back the next morning. And I went home, thinking nothing more of it. The next morning, I went back to the hospital early. When I knocked on the office door, the same man opened it, still wearing a sleeveless shirt. He smelled strongly of alcohol, and there were even more empty soju bottles on the table than the day before. Without saying much, he handed me gloves, an apron, and a mask. Then he gave me one piece of advice. Don't stare at the face for too long. After that, he opened the door behind the office and walked in. I followed him. The moment I stepped inside, the cold hit me. Not the kind you feel in winter air, the kind that sinks straight into your bones. I remember thinking that if I had come here in summer clothes, I wouldn't have lasted half an hour. What surprised me was that the man didn't seem bothered at all. He stayed in his sleeveless shirt, as if the cold didn't exist. He showed me how to work. We stood on opposite sides of the table, with a man's body between us. Someone who looked only a few years older than me. First the face, then the neck. The arms, the hands, the legs, the feet. As he worked, he spoke quietly. If the mouth is open, support the jaw and close it. If the eyes won't shut, press the lids gently. Treat them the same way you would treat the living. I didn't answer. I just followed his hands. When we finished washing, he brought out a burial robe, and together we dressed the body. After everything was done, he told me to go back to the office and clean up. At the sink, I kept washing my hands. For some reason, they never felt clean. A moment later, he came back, opened the fridge, and took out another bottle. Sitting on the sofa, he asked if I had ever done this kind of work before. I told him it was my first time. He stared at me for a second, then drank deeply from the bottle. Then he asked if I thought I could last. Most people, he said, quit after one day. But honestly, the work felt easier than I expected. I hadn't seen anything strange. I hadn't felt any presence at all. So I told him I would stay until winter break ended. He watched me silently, then offered me the soju bottle. I refused, not because I was underage, because he had already been drinking from it. Instead, he took out a few crumpled bills and placed them in my hand. Daily pay, not weekly. And he told me to go home. When I checked the money outside, it was more than I had earned at any other job. That evening I met a friend and drank until sunset in the mountains nearby. Strangely, the alcohol went down easily. No matter how fast I drank, I didn't feel drunk. Still, I stopped before I went too far and went home, thinking I had found the perfect job. That job turned out to be even better than I expected. The next morning, when I went back to the morgue, the man greeted me by handing me money. Before I even said a word, it was a full day's pay. Then he told me there was no work that day, said I could go home or sit on the sofa and sleep if I wanted. And with that, he leaned back and closed his eyes. For a moment, I just stood there, unsure if this was real. Getting paid without doing anything felt wrong. So instead of leaving, I put the money in my pocket and sat on the sofa across from him. I waited. The office was completely quiet. To pass the time, I counted the green soju bottles lined up against the wall, each one marked with a scratch. I lost count halfway through. The man didn't move at all. His breathing stayed slow and steady. He was truly asleep. After a long time, I stood up quietly and slipped out of the office. No one stopped me. I went home that day thinking I had found the easiest job in the world, and not once did it cross my mind that this silence was only temporary. For about a week, I worked there with the man every day. Most days, there was at least one body to clean, and I slowly got used to the routine, wiping the face, closing the eyes, straightening the hands. It stopped feeling shocking faster than I expected. Strangely, 2 of those days, there was no work at all. I would arrive in the morning, and he would hand me my pay and tell me to go home. No explanation. Just nothing today. At first, I thought it was lucky. Getting paid for doing nothing felt like winning a small lottery. The morgue stayed quiet the entire week. No strange sounds. No cold air. No shadows in the corners. I didn't see a single ghost. That alone made me believe something important. That maybe, finally, I had really left that world behind. The man stayed the same. Always drinking, always tired, always saying very little. We never talked about spirits or death or anything like that. He only taught me how to work faster and cleaner. By the end of the week, I wasn't nervous anymore. The place felt ordinary. And that was the mistake. About a week after I started, the man told me he would be gone for a few days. He said he had some personal business to take care of, and asked me to watch the place while he was away. I hesitated, but he insisted it would be fine. Before leaving, he gave me a few simple rules. I could drink if I wanted, but never enough to get drunk. And if I started cleaning a body, I had to finish it, no matter what happened. He said that part very clearly. That evening, I locked the morgue by myself for the first time. Standing in the hallway alone, I suddenly felt how empty the building really was. At home, I couldn't relax. Nothing bad had happened, but my chest felt tight for no reason. When I finally fell asleep, I had a dream. In the dream, I was back in the morgue. All the drawers were open. Everybody inside was sitting upright, and they were all looking at me. I woke up drenched in sweat. The next morning, I told myself it was just stress, just nerves. I believed that. The first day I worked alone, the cold felt different. It wasn't just the temperature. It felt like something heavy was sitting in the air. As soon as I stepped inside, my ankles went numb. The floor seemed colder than usual, even through my shoes. I kept telling myself it was winter, that nothing had changed. I brought out the first body and began the usual routine. Wash the face, close the eyes, straighten the hands. Nothing happened. No sounds. No movement. No strange feelings. But the silence felt thicker than before, like it was pressing against my ears. Working alone made me aware of every small noise. The drip of water, the scrape of cloth, my own breathing. When I finished, my shoulders were tense without me noticing. My hands were shaking slightly. I left earlier than usual that day, not because anything happened, just because I didn't want to be there alone anymore. That night, the same dream came back. The open drawers, the bodies sitting up. Only this time, one of them smiled. The next morning, the morgue felt even colder. I noticed it the moment I opened the door. The air stung my skin, sharper than the day before. I told myself I hadn't slept well, that skipping breakfast was making me sensitive. I brought out the first body and started cleaning as usual. Everything felt normal for a while. Then I heard it. Very faint. So quiet I almost missed it. A voice, somewhere behind me. "Hey." It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It sounded tired. The moment I heard it, I knew exactly what it was. Not a living person. Not my imagination. A ghost. I didn't turn around. I didn't answer. I kept wiping the face in front of me, pretending I had heard nothing. The voice didn't repeat itself, but I felt someone standing right behind my shoulder the entire time. When I finished, I dropped the cloth and left without looking back. I didn't walk home. I ran. As soon as I got home, I called my grandmother. She had been a moodang for most of her life, and she was the only person I trusted with stories like this. I told her everything. About the morgue. About working alone. About the voice I had heard. She didn't let me finish. She shouted at me to quit immediately. Said I should never go near that place again. I tried to argue, told her there was no one else to watch the morgue while the man was gone. That only made her angrier. Then she suddenly went quiet and asked me about the man. What he looked like. How he spoke. How he lived. I told her about the sleeveless shirt, the drinking, the way he never seemed cold. After listening for a long time, she asked me one more question. If I still had the talisman she gave me when I was a child. I had to think for a moment. Then I remembered. It was sewn inside my pillow. She told me to take it out and carry it with me at all times. And from that day on, she made me promise one thing. To call her every single night, no matter what happened. The next day, I went to work with the talisman in my pocket. The moment I opened the door, I felt the difference. The cold wasn't just stronger. It felt alive. When I stepped inside, the air wrapped around my legs like water, heavy and slow. I took out the first body and began cleaning. For a while, nothing happened. Then I felt it. Breathing. Not mine. Soft, slow breathing, right behind my ear. I didn't turn around. I focused on the face in front of me and kept wiping. But the breathing followed every movement. When I leaned forward, it leaned closer. When I straightened up, it stayed behind my shoulder. A whisper brushed past my neck. Please. Just one word. I clenched the talisman in my fist and finished as fast as I could. When I finally stepped away, my legs almost gave out. I didn't see anything, but I knew someone had been standing there the entire time. That night, when I fell asleep, the dream changed. The bodies were still sitting up. This time, they were calling my name. The next day, the voice finally showed itself. I was pulling open one of the drawers when I noticed someone standing near the wall. A young woman. She looked ordinary at first. Black hair, pale skin, hospital gown. If she had been alive, I would have thought she was a visitor who got lost. She looked at me and spoke calmly. I've been here for a long time. Her voice wasn't threatening. It was tired. She said the person who used to keep this place quiet had disappeared. I realized she meant the man. She told me she didn't know how to leave, that she was afraid she was going to stay there forever. I tried not to respond. I pretended she wasn't there and kept working. But she followed me as I moved, standing closer, watching my hands. While I cleaned the body, she quietly explained how she had died. I don't remember the details, only that when she finished talking, she looked relieved. And when I left that day, I realized something else. She had followed me all the way to the door. After that day, they started appearing one by one. Not all at once. Slowly. Sometimes I would see someone sitting on a chair in the corner. sometimes standing beside a drawer, waiting. Some of them cried. Some of them just stared at me without blinking. A few tried to touch me, hands brushing my arm, fingers pulling lightly at my sleeve. Once, while I was dressing a body, someone tugged on the hem of the burial cloth. I almost dropped it. I stopped working whenever I felt them too close, gripping the talisman until the air grew quiet again. But when I left the building, I could still feel them behind me. Footsteps that matched mine, breathing that didn't belong to me. At night, even in my own room, the silence felt crowded. Sometimes, just before falling asleep, I heard whispers near my pillow, calling my name. When I told my grandmother what was happening, she went very quiet. Then she said something I still remember clearly. That place has become a doorway. She explained that the morgue had never been safe to begin with. It was only quiet because the man's presence had been holding everything down. Not with prayers, not with rituals, just with his energy. She said people like him, with an overwhelming living presence, sometimes press spirits into the ground without knowing it. And when he left, everything that had been trapped there suddenly had space to move. She warned me never to stay there alone after sunset, never to answer any voice, never to let anyone touch my body. But there was nothing I could do. The man was still gone, and the morgue still had to be watched. That night, when I locked the door, I heard footsteps inside. Not one pair, many, walking slowly across the floor. One afternoon, while I was cleaning a body, something finally moved. I was wiping the hands when I felt a sudden twitch beneath my fingers. Just one finger. I froze. The body's eyes were still closed. The face completely still. I told myself it was muscle memory, something that sometimes happens after death. Then the finger moved again. This time, I stepped back. Behind me, the room was no longer empty. They were everywhere. Men, women, children, standing between the drawers, lining the walls, blocking the door. None of them looked angry. They looked desperate. They all spoke at once, asking me to send them away, begging me to open a path, telling me they had waited long enough. One of them stepped forward and reached for my chest. The moment her hand touched me, my breathing stopped. I pulled out the talisman and shouted the only prayer my grandmother had ever taught me. The air shook, the lights flickered, and suddenly the room was empty again. The body lay still, as if nothing had ever happened. After that day, I refused to be alone in the morgue. If a body arrived, I would wait and call another staff member to stand with me, even if they only stayed in the doorway. When someone else was there, the air felt lighter, the cold less sharp, the voices almost disappeared. But the moment I was alone, they came back. Whispers from inside the drawers, soft knocking from the walls. Sometimes they said the same thing. That man has to come back. He's the only one who can close this place. They told me they couldn't leave while he was gone, that the path only stayed open when no one was pressing it down. Slowly, I began to understand. The man wasn't protecting the place on purpose. His presence itself was the barrier, and I was standing in the middle of something I was never meant to touch. A few days later, the man finally came back. I heard his voice before I saw him, complaining to someone on the phone as he walked down the hallway. The moment he opened the morgue door, the air changed. Not slowly, instantly. The cold loosened its grip, like someone had turned off an invisible switch. The pressure in my chest faded in a single breath. I felt something else, too. Relief. All around me, the presence I had grown used to simply vanished. No footsteps, no whispers, No breathing behind my ear. Just silence. The man didn't notice anything strange. He tossed his bag on the sofa, opened the fridge, and pulled out a soju bottle like nothing had happened. He complained about traffic, about money, about being tired. I stood there, watching him, realizing something. This ordinary, careless man had been holding an entire doorway shut without knowing it. That day, I told him I couldn't keep the job anymore. He didn't ask why. He only nodded, handed me my last pay, and told me to take care of myself. When I left the building, I looked back once. For the first time in days, the windows looked dark and empty. After that, my life went back to what I used to call normal. When I say normal, I mean the kind of life where I start seeing them again. Not all the time, but often enough. Later, my grandmother finally explained what had really happened. She told me that morgues are places where spirits naturally gather, not because they're cursed, simply because so many people pass through them on their way out of the world. The only reason nothing had happened before was because of that man. His energy had been pressing everything down. The spirits were still there. They just couldn't move. When he left, they were finally able to act again. And unfortunately, the person standing there at that exact moment was me. Someone who had one foot in their world and one foot in this one. My grandmother said that was the worst possible situation. People like me are easy for spirits to reach, easy to touch, easy to influence, easy to use. And that doesn't just hurt the living, it hurts the spirits too. Because every time a spirit clings to a person, every time it interferes, every time it feeds on fear or emotion, it changes, slowly. A spirit that stays in disorder long enough eventually turns into something darker, something that can no longer leave. She told me that most spirits don't want that. They don't want to become monsters. But once a place falls into chaos, they don't really have a choice. That's why they wanted the man to come back. Not because they liked being trapped, but because being trapped was safer than becoming something they could never return from. Before disorder turned them into monsters, they chose silence instead. Anyway, that's all for this story. If I ever get the chance, I'll tell you another one. Stories about spirits that tried to live through me. Stories about ones that followed me, long after they should have disappeared. I still have many stories left. And one final piece of advice. In places like hospital basements or funeral homes, where death becomes routine, it's better not to stay there out of idle curiosity. Because places like that tend to attract things that never truly left. And once they notice you, they don't always forget.